Last week, we got through the entire chapter of chapter 5. And chapter 5 really dealt with rules of marriage, if you will, sins against committing adultery, faithfulness to your spouse. We saw in the first part, is in the way of a review, that the lips of an immoral woman, or you might have in there a strange woman or adulterous woman, drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil, paints the picture of kind of the allurement of this type of an individual. But we know that in the end, and there always is an end as we pointed out, she is bitter as wormwood. Say that 10 times real fast. And we know that wormwood is a shrub that has an extremely bitter taste. We talked about that. And it's actually used in the making of medicines and stuff for deworming animals, human beings, with parasites and that type of thing. And so it's very, very bitter in taste, so they say. We know that her way of life goes down to death, as it says in verse 5. Her ways are unstable. Verses 7 and 8 talked about to stay away. Therefore, hear me now, my children, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Remove your way from her. Do not go near the door of her house. We talked about then in the verses 10 through 14 that Solomon here had instruction. He just refused to listen to it. He said here, when your flesh and your body are consumed, and we talked about how that happens, the different diseases that you might get, and say, how have I hated instruction and my heart despised reproof? He says, I have not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined my ear to those who instruct me. And then we got down to verses 15 through 23, talked about the metaphors used here by Solomon, drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Then in verse 18, let your fountain be blessed. Rejoice with the wife of your youth, as it says, and always be enraptured with her love. And then the last part of it, 21 through 23, really, Mary brought up the point that are we teaching this to our kids? And we should be. We definitely should be. And it's not always on the woman's fault, as Jim was saying. It takes two to tango. And so here we see that this is a sin not only against the marriage vows, but against God. And that's very, very, very crucial for us to understand that. In the end, he shall die from lack of instruction or discipline, as we sometimes talked about. Are there any questions about chapter 5 in general, as we just did a real quick review? Okay, moving on to chapter 6. Chapter 6 deals with a number of things. This chapter has a number of independent warnings against 5 different things. First part we're going to talk about is to avoid surety. And what we're talking about is being security for the obligations or debts of others. And we're going to talk about that. And then we have warnings against laziness, against wicked men. We talk about the 7 things that God hates. And then we have the verses 20 through 35 is again, do not commit adultery. And we see that not only here in 6, but we're going to see it again in 7. Let's go back to verse 1. If someone could please read for me verses 1 through 5.
My son, if you have become surety for your neighbor, have given a pledge for a stranger, if you have snared with the word of your mouth, and you caught with the word of your mouth, do this then, my son, and deliver yourself. Since you have come into the hand of your neighbor, go humbly yourself and implore your neighbor. Give no sleep to your eye, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hunter's hand, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler.
Thank you. Go back to verse 1. Looking at verse 1, what is Solomon talking about here when he says, my son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger? Jim?
So that would be the same as if I came up to you and said, hey, can I borrow your car? And then take it, use it, wreck it, and I don't take
Restitution?
restitution for it. Or if you buy a couple of metal boxes, I'll still, but you take no payment for it. And he gets tired of waiting for the bill.
I,
Waiting for the restitution. And you better go get that straight.
there's a lot to that, and plus a little bit more, I think. What I get out of it, this is the equivalent in modern days terms of co-signing your neighbor's note. Okay? Neighbor goes to the bank, wants to borrow money for whatever reason. Banker says you need a co-signer. He comes over to you and say, hey, Jim, I need you to co-sign a note for me. You know? And this was the second part of that, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger. This was a procedure for concluding a bargain or a good deal. It's like our expression to shake hands on it. It's kind of binding, really. At least it was in the Old West, if you shook hands on it, that's for sure. The warning here is against risking irreparable harm. If through careless words or vanity one has done so, what Solomon is saying here, no time is to be lost in obtaining release from the agreement, which, from the context that we read here, has apparently been agreed to, but not has yet been carried out in effect. So there's still time to get out of it. Because, you see, what can happen if you obligate yourself to someone else's debts? Yeah. If you don't pay it, or if they don't pay it, then the bank is going to come to you, or whoever it is. You know, Guido the loan shark, or whatever. But that's something you got to be real careful about. In ancient times as well as modern times, the careless assumption of another's financial obligations could bring vast damages to that individual. Now, there are three things you have to ask yourself if you're going to loan somebody some money, okay? And I'm not saying that that's wrong, not to loan somebody money, but there's three things you must ask yourself. One, you need to determine that you won't be mad about it if you have to pay the note. Simple, okay? The second thing is be certain it will not injure your family if you have to pay. Your first obligation is to your family. Very true. And make certain, and this may be maybe the most important, I don't know, but make certain the purpose for the note is within the scope of God's will. See, has anybody ever had an experience like this they want to share? I did a little bit last week when I told you about the family at church whose husband was here illegally and wanted to go through the immigration process. And we went to see an immigration lawyer, and we talked, and they needed a sponsor. And the thing that was the turning point for me was I was told that if you sponsor this individual, and even if it's not his own fault, he runs up $250,000 worth of medical bills, you are responsible if he doesn't pay. Big gulp in my throat. I just couldn't do that. Anybody else had any similar experiences? Don? Yeah. It's a slippery slope that you walk on when you do something like that. Any other, Jack? Yeah,
You never want to put your family in harm's way.
that's right. And that's the most important. I mean, are you able to handle that type of a debt?
My grandma used to tell me, don't loan nobody no money.
Yeah,
And he loaned people money, and he knew the problems. He knew that there'd be problems that could arise from that.
yeah,
And really, unless you're in the professional or something like that, almost, you might almost want to go into the mindset of not expecting it back.
yeah. That's probably the best way to look at it.
Good chance that, unfortunately, a lot of times it's a good chance you won't.
And if you get surprised, hey, all the better. Now, one of the things I want to ask you here, does the refusal to be that cosigner or surety for a neighbor's debt means that you are heartless to their needs or, indifference to their needs? No, it doesn't. You know, um, if one is able to help his distressed neighbor, let him do so willingly, generously. But to guarantee the payments of his debts is not only unnecessary, but exceedingly foolish when you think about it. It was so when Proverbs was written, and it is written, and it's so true now. Here's the other thing that we don't think about. Guaranteeing to pay someone else's debt may even be an unintended disservice to that individual by exposing himself to temptation, perhaps causing him or her to continue to live beyond their means. In other words, to enable that person to do something they shouldn't. What does enabling mean? If you enable somebody, what does that mean? Contribute to their desires.
I got one going back to what John was saying. I just thought about it. Many years ago, my dad and my brother borrowed a whole bunch of money from my dad. Ended up he couldn't pay it back. It ripped the family apart.
Yeah. It's sad, but it happens that way. Mark? That's good. Well, you can tell them this. Hey, I brought you into this world. I can take you out. I know it's difficult for family. Jason. Yeah, yeah. Patricia, did you have your hands up? Yeah. Yeah. You make it easier for them to continue in that type of. Yeah. Took it out in trade. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's unbelievable. The guy would have said something. Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of times you can get to a resolution without having to hurt feelings and stuff. Jack.
thing in our day and age, most times if they can't get credit, it's for a reason.
That's right. That's right.
So they can't get it from the bank.
Yeah. I mean, there's places that no credit checks. You know, you see places like that all the time, and $50 down will buy you a house full of furniture. Who knows what the interest rate is? But I mean, they make it pretty easy. So if they can't get money, there's probably, like Jack said, a good reason. Good reason. And good comments. Any other thoughts on that? Notice here in verse 2, it says, "You are snared by the words of your own mouth." And then again, it almost repeats itself verbatim. "You are taken by the words of your mouth." Okay? The repetition of this phrase is intentional to give greater force to the fact that such entanglements, obligating yourself, is serious, really serious. I mean, there's horror stories all the time about such things that happen. We have to be real careful. Have to be real careful. Any other thoughts on that? Verse 5 in here says, deliver yourself. In other words, escape from this foolish agreement as swiftly as a gazelle, or we talked about last week, a deer would run away from a hunter, or a bird would fly away from a hunter. Get away as quickly, get out of the deal, whatever it takes to make sure that it becomes null and void and you're not obligated, because you'll probably kick yourself in the end because of things that can happen. Any other thoughts on 1 through 5? Okay. Let's look at 6 through 11. If someone would read those 6 verses, please. Okay? Thank you. What is a sluggard? Lazy. Sluggard is someone who is habitually lazy or inactive. Okay? Such a person does not take personal responsibility for their own lives. The word sluggard, it's interesting, is used 14 times in the book of Proverbs. So it must have been a serious situation back there, I think. Then it says, go to the ant. What do we know about ants? Very industrious. What else do we know? Anything? What? Okay. Yeah. They work. They are not afraid of work. You notice here where it says, consider her ways, referring to the female side here, ways, and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler. In other words, she works independently. She has no one to guide her, oversee her, or supervise her. Nobody to control and enforce the personal work. You know, a lot of times people at work will stay busy because somebody's watching them. You ever see that? Yeah, a lot of times. As soon as the boss is away, feet go up on the desk, kick back, take some time off. Not good. The ant is self-motivated, sets her own clock. She gets up on her own, works because she believes in it. As mentioned, industrious. She works at every opportunity and with foresight prepares for the bad days ahead, as it says in verse 8, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers food in the harvest. What happens when you find a person who works like this? Hire him, for sure. I mean, a person like this will always have a job. Always have a job. A Christian makes the best employer. Look in Colossians 3, verses 22 for me, please. Colossians 3, 22 through 24. Go ahead.
Slaves in all things obey those who are your masters on earth, not with external service as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord.
Absolutely. And it goes on, and I'll finish it. I should have said 22 through the end of it there, or 24. It says, and whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Do it for the Lord. That's who you're really doing it for. You know, too many times people are interested in a shorter work week. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that. Don't get me wrong. But they basically want to do less work for the same amount of pay. Okay, they want increased pay for what they do, and they don't maybe earn it or deserve it. A lot of people who could be working are on welfare. Okay, you don't want to get me started on that. Basically, people have the attitude sometimes to get all you can before you get caught, and I think that's wrong as could be. Mark, start. Just in case, yeah. I mean, I can remember I never acted any differently when anybody came in my classroom. I mean, there was a routine, and this is what we did, and it was, you know, busier than anything most of the time. Tom. Maybe skipped a step or two in there. Yeah, that's the one thing. Remember the earthquakes down in Southern California, what, 25 years ago or what it was, when the bridges collapsed and everything? They told the crews that were going to repair those, if you'll get them done at this certain time, you know, quicker than if it was supposed to take 6 to 8 months and they could do it in 3 to 4, there would be bonuses for them. Okay? And the idea was to help motivate, but the problem you have to be careful is that they don't take a shortcut and cause, obviously, it not to be safe or constructed well. So you have to be careful on that, but I remember that. Yes? Yeah, 2 Thessalonians 3 and 10. If a man will not work, don't let him eat, you know. And that's not to say, people are out of work a lot of the times, and they're looking for jobs, actively looking, okay? We're not talking about those people, okay? A lot of times people want a position rather than a job, you know? There's nothing that says you can't work as a stock boy in Safeway, you know, or Costco at night if you need to make money to put food on your table. You know, whatever you have to do, you need to do. Jim. Yeah. 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 There's a lot of people who scam that welfare system big time, and I mean we're kind of are blaming ourselves because we make the rules too easy for people to bend or break, and the enforcement's not there, and there's no consequences once they do get caught. Really, oh, you're off of welfare, until they do something else. So, Jason, then Patricia. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good point, Patricia. Yeah. Well, the big thing that always bothered me, this kind of goes hand in hand with it. And Jason, anybody who's taught a vocational type education class is the quality of work that the kids want to put into the effort in doing it has gone downhill 10 times. I mean, back years ago in shop and stuff, kids were making grandfather clocks. I mean, beautiful pieces of work. You know, now what they make is simple, but it's hardly very good. I mean, to put it nicely, I guess. But yeah, yeah, yeah. Or if they can measure within a quarter inch, it's pretty good. And you just go, what has gone wrong? And we hammer and hammer it and hammer it into them, and they don't care about the quality. I got a C. Okay, that's enough. That's great. Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah. They have nobody overseeing them, so but they're just industries. Mark. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. All they want to do is barely enough to get by. I got a D. Yes. That's passion. But a D? I mean, come on. Any other? Yes. Honey. Yeah. Again, a way to beat the system. Yeah. Yeah. People like free stuff. We're seeing this right now today going on with this socialism that people are talking about. Now, I'm not talking politics about in church, okay. But, I mean, if you turn on the news, that's what's happening. And I don't know who said it, but somebody once said, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody pays for it, okay? That money that they're getting is not free. Somebody, you and me, are paying for it with our taxes. And it's just, refer back to 2 Thessalonians there. Any other comments? Good comments.
I think it's God is telling us we need to be like that.
Yeah.
You don't want us to be sluggish.
No. And it goes on here, and we're going to talk a little bit more in verses 9 through 11. Going back to talking about the sluggard. Modern translation of sluggard is basically somebody who's a work hater. They hate work. The sluggard will sleep when everybody else is up and about. He or she will make excuses for not wanting to work. Oh, I can't do it today, for whatever reason. Okay, and then in verse 11, laziness will leave the sluggard as destitute as a traveler who is stripped by a robber. The point is that poverty and indebtedness will cling to the slothful like a beggar who lingers about the house and always wants more. How true. Any other comments? Good comments. All right, let's look at verses 12 through 15. If somebody could read that for me, please. Perversity? Through 15, please. Thank you. Solomon says here, do not be dishonest. Okay, a worthless, or some translations may say naughty. NIV says scoundrel. And that's really, I like that. Man is one who is wicked. He is characterized by dishonesty. He says one thing with his mouth, but his facial expressions, his feet, his hands say something else. I know you're all going to like this question. Have you ever been able to tell when somebody is lying to you? Okay? How can you tell? Watch their eyes. Very seldom they won't look at you. Well, I need to, okay? Never say it. Yeah, that's how people get arrested because they, if you always tell the truth, it never changes. But when they lie, you have to remember what you lied about. And they get caught. Yes, sir. What's that? Oh, yeah, they don't want to talk with you. They don't want to be, make contact. They might be a little on edge, shuffling their feet, moving their hands, twitching. Yeah. Yes, sir. Body language. Yeah. Mark. I love that saying, actions speak louder than words. I mean, that's nothing more true. Jim? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, very seldom will they still be hanging around. They're gone. Yeah. But, I got pretty good, and I think any teacher who's taught for any period of time can get pretty good in knowing when students are lying to them. I had this one student who just, all the time. And finally he said to me one day, he said, Mr. Gentry, how do you know that I'm lying? And I said, because your lips are moving. I mean, it was so bad. I know Jason's experience. It just happens. So anyway, that's interesting because you can tell when somebody has lied to you because of the way their body language is, like which was said over here, how they act, their facial expressions, nervousness, all sorts of things give it away. Any other comments on that question? Got just a little bit more here. I'm going to go through 14 and 15. New King James Version says, perversity is in the heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Solomon says here, do not be rebellious. Perversity, or your Bible, does anybody have this word? Froward. F-R, frowardness. And I have to be honest, I didn't know what that word was, so I had to look it up. Which means willfully contrary, not easily managed, or difficult to deal with. I like what the NIV says, who plots evil. Okay, that says it pretty good. He who does these things, he who has this type of heart, causes him to be constantly involved in wrongdoing. He continually, as it says here, tries to stir up trouble. He sows discord among the brethren. And we know what we're going to get to that as well. Yeah, big time. That's a biggie. But Solomon goes on to say, such an attitude will have a short-lived excitement. Okay? Destruction will come sooner than he anticipates, as it says in verse 11 there. Or I'm sorry, verse 15. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. Any comments on 12 through 15? Yes, sir. It is. Oh, yeah. I mean, people who are caught up in that think they're going to be able to take care of it by throwing more money at it. And I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening. And I'm talking jail time. Yeah. And because you got to send a signal. If you don't send a strong enough signal, people will continue doing that. I believe I'll go ahead and stop there. It looks like people in the foyer. So thank you very much for a great class and good participation. And